But I agree with you that it's very, very unusual, and I'm willing to undertake trying to find out what it is. And they said, well, how long do you think that will require? And I said, probably no more than a few months at the most. I'll take it out, I'll talk to experts, I'll find out, you know, they should be lining up when they see how weird it is. They should be lining up to try to figure out what it is, so it shouldn't be long. I would say 6 months maximum. And here I am talking to you today, a few months short of 12 years. It's pretty clear that I had a very bad misconception of what I was going up against in terms of resistance to figuring out what this was. But at the time, I was not too worried. But then as I took it out in the beginning of '99 and began to take it to experts who would talk to me now, let's get clear on most of the people that I would contact would not talk to me. Because unfortunately, in the first week, that I had the skull, I took it to that conference that I was on my way to. It was the UFO Congress of Laughlin, Nevada, of February of 1999. And when I took it there, I showed it to a number of experts in the field of ufology. Now, at the time, I knew next to nothing about it. Ufology. I wasn't that interested in UFOs or aliens. I was interested in hominoids, human origins, the work of Zecharia Sitchin. That was my field. So I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I didn't really know much about this, what this might be relative to UFOs and aliens. But I knew that if I took it to that conference, there would be many, many top-notch experts there who could tell me a lot more about it, and they did. So I took it to them and I showed it to them and to groups of them, and they were all very excited about it. They all agreed with Melanie that probably was a gray alien. It had all the hallmarks, all the physical hallmarks that it needed, and it was so different from the human that I had there as a comparison, that everybody was really urging me, you know, this really could be it. This really could be it. So the first thing we did that week was take it to a lab to be x-rayed. In a lab in Las Vegas, a friend named Mark Bean did that. And there they found that it had no frontal sinuses at all. No frontal sinuses at all. And they also found that in the maxilla, the little piece of maxilla that we had, which had 2 teeth down, it had 5 teeth, 5 crowns up here waiting to come down. So the radiologist said, this is really, really unusual, the lack of sinuses, because look, there are no vestiges, there's no nubs, there's no attempt to grow sinuses here. They're not there, they're gone, and that's very unusual. People can be born without well-functioning sinuses or very small sinuses, but there's always some kind of a sign that they tried to grow, you know. And then he said, as far as the maxilla goes, if you've got teeth down and you've got teeth up, that's a child of 5 or 6 or in that range. So when he came back, we got all excited about it, and we said, well, let's call it the Starchild. And so we did, Starchild, right out of the box. Big mistake, because that prejudiced scientists against it immediately. They would hear that word Starchild and run the other way because it was presupposing an alien existence, and they cannot tolerate that. They can't have anything to do with that. So I was up against it, trying to convince people to talk to me about it. And at first I began to just not say Starchild, I'd just say I'd have an unusual skull. What are you doing with a skull? Well, it came into my possession and I'm trying to find out what it is, and there was always a lot of suspicion, but they would agree to talk to me, and if they would, some of them, as soon as they would see it, they would just show me the door. I don't want to talk about that. But every once in a while I'd get one that would tell me what I wanted to know, or they'd tell me their expertise, but they would say, but you can't use my name. And every once in a while, every once in a blue moon, I'd find one that would let me use their name. So it was a hard slog at first, but by the end of the year, by the end of '99, I talked probably to 30 or more experts, and they had convinced me in talking about their various areas of expertise, which they would say, well, I can't explain mine, but surely the rest of it it's a deformity of some kind. And they would most often say probably a cradle-boarded hydrocephalic. That's what I got consistently. Every once in a while I'd hear other things like cruzons or aperts or something like that. In the early days I never heard progeria from anybody. Now it's a common thing for them to say, even though it's not any of those things. But at first it was mostly cradle-boarded hydrocephalic. Well, very quickly I learned and figured out that it couldn't be either cradle-boarded or hydrocephalic. So that led to some confrontations when people would say, oh, that's a cradle-boarded hydrocephalic, and I would begin to explain how that couldn't be. And scientists, for the most part, are not good at being told they're wrong by somebody who's, in their mind, much lower than them on the pecking order of intellectual ability. So, we had some problems with that. But by the end of the year, I had stacked up 25 major physiological differences between this skull and a human skull. And those 25 major differences stood for a lot of genetic difference in the Starchild and the human. It indicated, or it meant, that it had so many genetic instructions that were significantly different from human that it probably had a lot of genetic difference within its genome. But the problem was we couldn't get any help getting to that genome, because in 1999 there were only 6 labs in the world that could recover ancient DNA, and by then we had established through carbon-14 testing that it was 900 years old. So knowing that, we had to go to an ancient DNA lab. We couldn't get any of those 6 labs to touch it with a 10-foot pole for any amount of money. Didn't matter. Starchild, alien, we don't want anything to do with it. So by the end of '99, I had convinced myself that it wasn't a human deformity, and I had stacked up all these physiological differences. But none of those physiological differences, either individually or all together, meant anything to science. Science fully refused to accept the possibility that this could be anything other than a deformity, and they did so by saying nature can do anything. That was the answer I kept hearing from everybody. Well, nature can do anything. Nature can do that. Nature can do anything you point out that's different. Nature can do that. Nature is all powerful. It can produce any combination of defects it wants, and there's nothing you can say about it. And so I realized that I was hamstrung in proving anything against that answer, because it defeated everything. Only DNA, everybody said, show us some DNA that's not human and we'll be impressed. But showing us these physical features that aren't human, that doesn't impress us, because that's possible for nature to do, but nature can't fiddle with DNA. DNA is what it is. It's the math of biology. So show us some different DNA, we'll be impressed. And so that became sort of the task from the end of '99 forward. And because I couldn't get any of the 6 current labs in the world that could recover ancient DNA to consider it, I chose to go with a forensic lab, which was much less sophisticated, and it was a teaching lab at the University of British Columbia in Canada. And while they were not really capable of doing what we needed, they were designed to recover DNA less than 50 years old, not 900 years old. But the thinking was that since the skull had been buried in a mine tunnel for 900 years, that the DNA would be fairly fresh, that it would still be good, and it might be fresh enough to qualify as less than 50 years. That was the hope. And so they said, we will try to tell you if your nuclear DNA is viable, if it's there, if it's not degraded. And we don't think that it will be. If it was indeed in a mine tunnel, it should be well preserved, because a mine tunnel is like a climate control storage locker. It keeps a steady temperature. There's no rain to leach minerals into the bone. There's no sun to bake it out and cause degradation. So it should really be in good shape. We should be able to do it. So I said, okay. So gave them the skull, said go to work. And they contaminated the first sample. Again, students, this is a student-run organization, so things are going to happen, and they weren't prepared to deal with something like this. Contaminated the first, contaminated the second. And in the third test, they got an answer, but it was a very weak and a very unreliable answer. They got what at that time was 200 picograms of a result that said it was a human male, an XY chromosome arrangement that said it was a human male. And I just had a feeling that it was probably another contamination, because 200 picograms is 1/5 of the minimum 1,000 picograms that you required for a reliable answer. So I was not satisfied with that, and I requested another run to make sure as a backup. And the next run came in the exact same thing. They said 200 picograms male XY, and I was very dissatisfied with that answer, notwithstanding the fact that it was saying that the Starchild was a human male and it was therefore a deformity and you could just forget about it and go home. I did not feel that the lab was acting in good faith with their results. I think they were just trying to get rid of us. I think they were having problems that they didn't want to admit to, problems that they didn't want to address openly. And so rather than try to do that, they just tried to get rid of us with the one answer that would do that, which is a human male, because it's over then. Go home, done. So at the end of '99, there was a collapse, an absolute collapse of interest in the Starchild, because the word went out from the lab that it was a human male, and a skeptic named Stephen Novella at the New England Skeptical Society, an organization that he founded and runs, wrote an article, a very scathing article about the Starchild and about me and everything that we were trying to do, saying that this was just a complete bust. It was a human, that was it. Everybody could just forget about it now and for always and never give it another thought, and that was it. And that bled over into the field of alternative knowledge. I could not get anybody to take it seriously. Nobody would invite me to speak about it. They would all just say, wasn't it proved human? And I would say, well, a lab said it was human, but that doesn't mean that it really was. I think they made a mistake. How would they make mistakes? They're scientists. How would they make mistakes? And I'd say, well, I think they did, and I don't think they told the truth. Well, why wouldn't they tell the truth? They're scientists, you know, and it was incredibly hard to overcome that brainwashing that is common in the public, that science just doesn't make mistakes and doesn't have agendas and doesn't have emotional axis to grind and all. They're human beings, and they have all the faults that the rest of us have, but their propaganda has brainwashed the public into believing that they are above those kinds of things, which they're not. So I was, for 3.5 years, I struggled very hard, well, 3 years, to get people to take a second look, and I just could not overcome that article. I couldn't overcome the articles, the negative articles about it. The novella article spawned other articles, negative, that they used that as a reference, and it was hopeless. So in that time, I went very, very deeply in debt and just couldn't get it going. So at the end of 2002, around Christmas time, my girlfriend of the time just gave me an ultimatum, and she said, "You have got to stop this. You have got to quit. You've got to give it up. It's killing you. It's driving you down. You know, it's wrecking our relationship. You need to stop." And so I had to agree that it had gotten out of control. So I put out the word to my mailing list that I was going to give it up as of January 1st, and I was going to return the skulls to Ray and Melanie, and they were just going to be able to do whatever with it and give it to anybody else they wanted or whatever, but I couldn't do anymore. I closed by saying I'm still convinced that it's not a typical human deformity, that lab made a mistake, but until I can get, until there's another test done on it, we're not going to know for sure.